talking about China. And yesterday, in talking about China, one of the things that we mentioned in talking about China was that they have a worldview that may be a little bit different from the worldview that we have today. For example, we talked basically about their belief in the afterlife is such that you and I have the opportunity and the responsibility to communicate with our dead loved ones. We talked about the word divination, that's like talking to the dead. And we said in China they might use different things like oracle bones, where you write the question on a turtle shell and you heat it up and it cracks. That's a coded message from beyond the grave. And that's kind of like different than what we in our culture believe broadly, but our culture does believe in paying people to read your palms or to look at tea leaves. These are all things that happen in American culture today. We also mentioned last time that they believe that the gods can actually have a say in who's the leader of China. We talked about that there's something called the mandate of heaven. And this is kind of like a permission slip to rule China, not like a physical piece of paper, but like if things are going right, if things are going well, if things are good, that's like the God's way of telling us that they're cool with who's in charge. But if there's disease and if there's war and if there's a flood and there's an earthquake, the gods are telling us it's time to look for a different leader. Now, today we're going to talk about legalism and Confucianism. And these are two philosophies that have had an influence in China. And I think, just started talking about legalism last time. And I think one of the things we told you about legalism was that legalism says something's true about all of us, about our very nature. And what is true about our very nature? Did we work on this?
Yeah, like humans are basically evil.
Humans are basically evil, so we did. So on the front side, the last two lines, we said what's true about human nature, we are basically evil, right? And the example I gave was that when you were little, no one had to teach you how to lie. You lied on your own. No one taught you how to cheat. You cheated on your own. No one ever taught you how to take a cookie without permission. You took it on your own. What you have to be taught to do is taught to share, taught to be kind, taught to forgive, taught to say you're sorry. These are things that are not natural. We are basically evil. Legalism said then on the last line of the front side that humans are so evil, we need strict laws to basically force us to be good, right? That's what we need. And now on the back side, it says fear as a factor. We'll write down fear as a factor. You should be afraid to break the law. You should be afraid to break the law. In other words, what we need is we need punishments that are so intense that you wouldn't think twice about breaking the law. At our school, at our school, if Addison didn't wear an ID around her neck, would you be super afraid of the consequences of LaPorte High School?
Yeah.
No, right? Many of us don't wear IDs, and even though they come on the announcement and say, hey, wear an ID, many of us are unfazed by that, right? If, for example, if Juan was running late and they come on the announcement and say, hey, have you 1 minute, does Juan have to fear, like in all honesty, if he doesn't get to class right on time in a typical day at LaPorte High School? No. Now, I know we have a new policy and they're going to make it better or whatever, but honestly, there's a lot of kids who are unfazed. If you wanted to, have clothes that shows midriff, are girls afraid of the consequences of showing off their belly piercing and midriff at LaPorte High School? No, because people routinely break those rules, right? So we don't have a school where we're afraid to break those rules, and that's part of the problem, legalists would say, with society. People aren't afraid of the consequences of that. They're not afraid of the consequences of murder. They're not afraid of the consequences of kidnapping. So we have a world that's kind of falling apart. Wouldn't it be better if we had harsher laws and less murder, harsher laws, less kidnapping, harsher laws and less rape? They would say so. In fact, on the handout, it says what we need is some serious revision of the laws so that you don't even want to commit a small crime because the punishment's so intense. I want you to write down this where it says trash in the street. Let's say that Daniel was driving home and you're driving behind Daniel in Fairmont, and Daniel rolls down his window, and out of his window he throws a bag of Whataburger just like on the median. Now, in likelihood, in reality, if anything were to happen, if a police officer saw this happen, what might happen to Daniel if he just like threw his trash out the window on Fairmont? Yeah, maybe a fine. Maybe they'll say, hey, you have to do community service, maybe, right? And people litter, like you may have thrown stuff out your window before saying, it's going to be a fine. It's not a big deal. But legalists would say this, you know what we need for a crime like this? It's a relatively small thing, but if we have a big punishment, that's going to set a message. It's going to set the tone so that people will say, wow, if they did that to Daniel for littering, what are they going to do to me for X, Y, or Z? What I want you to write down for trash in the street, what did they do? I want you to write down, they chopped off your hand. They chopped off your hand. If you were caught littering, if you were caught messing up your neighborhood, messing up your community, you know what we're going to do to Daniel? We're going to chop off Daniel's hand. And if they're willing to chop off his hand for littering, maybe you might question, what are they going to do to me if I murder? What are they going to do to me if I steal? What are they going to chop off for me if I rape someone? What are they going to do if the penalty is that great for the small? What are they going to do for the big? And if that's true, if that's the case, are we going to see a reduction in crime? Now, in our country, what happens to a person if they sexually assault or they rape a person? They get the death penalty? That happens in the United States? What happens? They go to jail, but you might be in jail. You might be in jail for 10 years or 20 years, but you're gonna get out. What if we did change it? What if we did say, if you rape a person, you get the death penalty? Like, we have the death penalty. We do have the death penalty in different states, but what if we added, maybe like a rape or kidnapping? You see stories of like 4-year-old kids kidnapped and they abuse these children. If we honestly added the death penalty to those crimes, do you think the amount of date rapes, the amount of sexual assault, the amount of men overstepping boundaries, do you think that would go down possibly if that meant you're going to jail and you're going to get the death penalty? I mean, yeah, maybe it would go down. And so that's what legalists say, is that what we need harsh laws, and maybe not just harsh, because we have the death penalty, but what does our Constitution say we cannot have regarding punishments? What kind of punishments does our Constitution? No, it doesn't. It says in our Constitution, there's something called the Bill of Rights. It says we cannot have cruel or unusual punishment. I talked to my last period class, and I got them to agree that they'd be open to changing the Constitution, because what if we allow torture just for certain terrible crimes? Like, sadly, speeding, not a terrible crime. Not wearing your ID, not a terrible crime. But like, there are horrific things like, pedophilia. There are people who like rape children. There's, these types of horrific things. Would you be okay if we tortured rapists? Yeah. Like, would you be okay? Like, for example, what if we castrated men who committed rape? Castration is where you chop off their male part. Now, that's terrible. And that's horrific. But listen, that is a punishment that has happened in different societies. And if that honestly was the punishment, and men knew that when they went to college, and men knew that when they were offering girls drinks, and men knew that when they were thinking about putting something in her beverage, and they knew, hey, if I get convicted of this, if there's a DNA test that links me to this woman, that could happen to me, would our date rape numbers go down? And if that's the case, would it be worth getting rid of part of the Constitution, this no cruel and unusual punishment, for a greater good? Like, would you support that? Like, perhaps, so you'd be open to that. Is there anything possibly bad to changing the Constitution to allowing cruel and unusual punishment? Because I'm saying, let's do it for the greater good. Let's do it to reduce these horrific crimes. What's possibly bad?
I'm not saying that. Well, kind of, but like if you do that with the Constitution,
Mm-hmm.
then like people are gonna think it's just changeable for everyone. Yeah, you can change everything.
But what if I just want to change it for like certain good things? Like I want to suspend this right, but only for like a good reason. Like I'm not saying let's just suspend this right flippantly, just randomly. I want to suspend this right for things that we all agree will make society better. And like we can agree that these are like a list of horrific crimes. Why don't we just like change it so that we can torture for causes we think are noble? What could be wrong with that?
False accusations.
Okay, we'll go to that in a second, but I don't think you were going to say that. But we'll come back. I'll let you elaborate on that in a moment. Say whatever original point you wanted.
Yeah, false accusations is valid, and already in the jail, a lot of people in there don't like rapists. They don't like pedophiles. They beat them up, and sometimes they beat them so bad that they kill them. I know this because of my aunt, but
Mm-hmm.
murderers, rapists, pedophiles, sex offenders, anything like that, they get beaten, and sometimes they could just, die.
Right.
And a lot of prison wardens don't really intervene.
Like they turn the other way. They look the other way.
Because they can be bribed to turn the other way. They can be bribed to get something for the people in jail.
Okay. So how do you feel about that? Like when you hear this horrific criminal got beat up by other criminals, do you feel like sorrow? Do you feel he got what he deserved? How do you feel? What does that make you feel?
I feel bad because he could be regretting his choice in prison, but also I would probably be a rapist.
So you would do? No. I think she did not enunciate that.
Yeah, you didn't enunciate that.
Being
Okay.
a rapist.
Yeah. So for the tape, she did not say I would probably be a rapist.
I would punch a rapist.
She would. Right. So you're saying that in processing this, you actually sympathize with the mob. And so I'm saying, hey, let's go with that. But instead of like a mob, let the government do it. Let us, instead of like a bunch of prisoners doing what we all kind of secretly want to do, that can get out of hand when mobs do it. Let's just change the law. Let's change the Constitution that prohibits cruel and unusual punishment. And now let's let the government do what we all, I think you're saying, instinctively in our mob thinking know is right. So this is actually more humane. That's fine. I mean, we could discuss that. So I think you might be actually enforcing my view that I'm suggesting that we all intuitively want this. Now, you mentioned, what's your point you want to make about false accusations? Because I'm just trying to stop women and children from being hurt. And I feel like you're not on the same page. What's your objection?
Also, the example of false blasphemy video last big client.
Oh,
People
okay.
can take advantage of what everyone hates. Like, most society, everyone hates rapists or pedophiles.
Mm-hmm.
But if people start falsely accusing, people don't know who's right and wrong, and that can lead to just people assuming like it's accused of a rapist or pedophile.
Okay.
And that can lead to injustice,
All right. So James, I hate this point you're making because you're making a very specific example. You're mentioning that we watched these blasphemy laws in Pakistan, and that something, I think in the video it said 95 to 99% of the people accused of the crimes, there's like no crime. It's just like, oh, I don't like you, or oh, we have a land dispute, or oh, you wronged me in 5th grade, or whatever it is. It turns out to be bogus. So you're saying that if I give the government the power to torture a certain group of people, you're saying that we as humans are going to find a way to use that for wrong.
Yeah.
That's what you're saying.
I mean, this is an entire trip
So-
killing men. I don't like
so-
to get the government more power.
So what if I say that's true, but even if, James, even if that does happen from time to time, or even this, today there's punishment for rape. Today, do women falsely accuse sometimes?
Yes.
Okay, but do we throw out the laws? Like a guy could go in jail for 20 years. A guy could lose his job. A guy could lose his reputation. A guy could spend all that time. That could happen today. Like what I could say, James, that's true. That can happen. But we don't throw away the laws we have now. why would we throw away these other laws that actually reduce the amount of assaults on women? And what if I argued further, James? What if I said, maybe an innocent man gets killed or whatever, but even his death discourages other men who were thinking about this. It discourages other men who thought, nah, there's no consequences. I can do what I want. So what if I said, yes, this happens regardless of the punishment. It happens today. But the only difference, James, is that with my law, we're going to see rapes go down. That would be maybe my counter to that. Are you raising your hand? Okay, go ahead, Car.
Oh, me? Oh, well, like, I guess I kind of understand that, but like at the same time, it's getting rid of one life who was perfectly fine. He was just really good.
He was a rapist?
No. I thought you were saying no. I thought you were saying just like that. I thought we were still on the falsely accused.
Oh, okay,
I
gotcha,
thought we were still on
gotcha.
that. Hold up. Like,
Yes,
so we're
and
falsely
that's
accused
tragic.
going on.
And that's tragic, right?
Yeah.
But again, I'm going to say, are there people today in jail who are there falsely?
Yes, but it's not as bad because they're not dead. So like, they're in jail. Evidence comes up. Sure, they lost a large portion of their life, but they are alive. And they can start rebuilding. But if you're dead,
Okay, do you believe in the death penalty?
yeah, for some.
Are there some people who've been executed and it turns out, oops, my bad, we were wrong?
I don't
Has
know.
that ever happened?
I don't know.
Yes,
Okay.
it has.
So it has. So I'm saying we already have this situation. We have the situation now, except I am, again, saving lives. That's super sad. It's unfortunate. It's an imperfect world. There's never going to be a perfect world. I acknowledge that. But mine is the only one, the argument that I'm making is saying, that actually reduces crime. And that's what legalists are saying. We need to stop being so soft on criminals, and we can actually make your life better. Last two or three, go ahead, one.
I got the cause to stop voting.
What?
It just goes both ways. If you falsely accuse someone, you get the same penalty as if you raped someone.
Okay, so it's almost like epic, like Code of Hammurabi. You're actually like making this Code of Hammurabi that if it turns out false accusation, what if we?
Done for.
Okay, so he's actually
Get
saying
him out of here.
we should actually expand the circle of torture and death to also false accusation. Because at first, now you're making me think of maybe embracing this, because at first I thought, let's just torture and kill rapists, but now maybe he's right. Maybe we should torture and kill people who falsely accuse others. I think I might be on, maybe there's a broader list of people it's okay to torture and kill. Good thinking there, the legalists might say. Go ahead.
With your proposal of changing the Constitution and the Bill of
For the
Rights,
better, yes, to save lives.
would it also apply to women who rape, who are not as
Yeah.
like whenever men bring up like what happened to them, a lot of men aren't believed.
Yeah.
So what would be your way of
That's a good
fixing
question. No, so women do rape men, but of course, the percent of that, like if you look at total rapes and sexual assaults, 98% of sexual assaults are men on women. This does occur though. And
But you can look that up.
what's that?
And I think that's also because women aren't convicted as
Yeah,
much as
but
men
even if
are.
they were, I cannot imagine that the percent is that high. Like the truth is, most violent crime in our country is committed by men. Like the average murderer in our country is a man, overwhelmingly. If you were to tell me there was a murderer, the chance of it being a man is if there's domestic abuse, not that women don't abuse husbands, they do, but overwhelmingly. And I'm going to say, I think my proposal is solving 99% of this. That's a great question. I don't have an easy answer about what to do with women, but I'm solving 98, 97, 99% of the problems if we could just get on board of changing the Constitution. Did you have a last comment?
No.
Okay, this is legalism. This is what their argument is. This is what they're saying. And also, where it says community approach, I want you to write down that your neighbors are spying on you. Your neighbors are spying on you, where it says community approach. What I mean by this is, what if I get you guys to partner with me to stop crime? You know, sometimes you go to neighborhoods and there's like a sign that says, hey, community watch or whatever. And it's like, oh, you know, it makes you like think, oh, I'm not going to rob my neighbor's shed because, you know, But what if we take it a step further? And what if I really need all of you guys to tell on your neighbors if they're, but that word has a negative connotation. How about this? I don't pay you. How about this though? Listen, what if I, the government, find out that you knew your neighbor was breaking law X, Y, or Z? And if I, the government, learn that you knew, and I say you are just as guilty because you didn't do anything about it. There's a super sad case about this girl who was a backpacking across the country with her boyfriend. Maybe you saw this on TV. Yeah. She had like this YouTube channel and Instagrammed her van trip across the country with her boyfriend. And millions of people watched her Instagram videos, blah, blah, blah. But it turns out that she went missing. And the boyfriend came back home to the Florida home and says, I don't know what happened to my girlfriend. Now, if I was a police officer and there was like a couple that went across the country and they were doing everything together, and then all of a sudden he came back to his parents' house and said, I don't know where my girlfriend is, I would put two and two together and say, I think you killed your girlfriend, you know? And what happened in this case, what happened to the missing girl, sadly? They found her dead. She's been murdered. And well, what happened to the boyfriend since then?
Is he arrested?
He was, but he was.
Well, he was actually never arrested. He was questioned, but then he disappeared. We don't know where he is. And so, gosh, I wonder why, you know, like he ran away. And so the question is, what do the boyfriend's mom and dad, like what role do they play? Like he was home living with them for like a week. And then when the police were asking questions, like, oh, I'm going to go on a hike. And like, he hasn't been seen since. So people are now asking the questions, what did the parents of the boyfriend know? And if they did know, are they in some sense responsible?
Yeah,
So listen, same thing with this whole legalist philosophy. Just like all of you agree, if the parents knew, they should be held to some sort of responsibility. What if I as a legalist say, I totally agree. And that's why I need your help. Because listen, if you know your neighbor's breaking the law, you need to tell me, the government. Because it's actually for our greater good that you spy on your neighbors, you tell on your neighbors, you let me know, and I'm going to take care of it. And if you don't tell me, you're just like the parents of that guy. You are enabling crime. So don't you think it's better that we live in a world where your neighbors can spy on and tell on you for the greater good?
It's not the Nazis did.
But, I mean, that is true.
That is actually.
I am talking about building a better world here. And you, we went from me arguing, listen, hold on. I went from trying to keep boyfriends from secretly murdering their girlfriends, and you say I am like Adolf Hitler for wanting that? How so? Like, your answer is, Lacone, you don't want girlfriends murdered by boyfriends, you're a Nazi. How do we make that jump? I'm literally trying to protect society in this legalist philosophy, and I'm turned into the bad guy?
Yeah, like Germany, they had you snitch if you were Jew. Like, oh, your neighbor's a Jew. Knock, knock, you're getting guessed.
Oh my God.
So, of course, so I can agree with you. I can agree with you that that's wrong. And the thing is, I am not saying we torture anyone. I'm not saying that we as society, like a society, right? I'm not saying that we torture anyone. I am saying, though, that we just torture people that we agree are bad. Like I thought I had you on my team when I was saying rapists and child molesters. I thought like we were agreeing moments ago that those would be people that we would be open to torturing and killing. I mean, some of people said that they wish they could beat these people to death themselves. And now you guys have like left the team that I represent, which is like order and safety, for women and our most vulnerable people. What happened?
But wouldn't that like give too much power to the government? And, like,
Well, right now we're giving power to the bad guys.
not be.
Does
They are
it
really
bad?
bad.
The government wants you to spy on your neighbor, not someone.
Okay, so I agree. They want to spy, but for what purpose? For the purpose of preventing these terrible things that we see on the television, to prevent these terrible stories that we see a true crime Netflix show, and we say, oh, if only we lived in a world where people would actually say more. That's what the legalist is saying we have right now in legalism. So you can choose to have all these freedoms and women get raped and people get kidnapped and murders happen, or we could give up some of these freedoms and have a world where you're safe to walk out your door. Go ahead.
Okay, so what about people who murder in self-defense?
That's not murder.
Would that be bad?
No, that's not murder. In fact, if someone broke into your house and they tried to assault you and hurt you, and there was a struggle, and like you had like a kitchen knife and you killed them, you're not guilty of murder. You're defending yourself. That's called self-defense. So I agree with you. We should be able to. That's basic. Everyone agrees with that.
I agree with that, but what if the neighbor doesn't actually know it was self-defense? They just heard the gunshots. Like, they didn't see the guy assault.
They see that my
Then they just hear the gunshots. And like,
From
oh,
my
he
house?
just killed someone. Yeah.
So
Like,
if your neighbor, so put it to you, if you heard gunshots coming from your neighbor's house and you went in and someone who's not your neighbor's dead, what conclusion would you reasonably make?
My neighbor just.
My neighbor kidnapped this man, brought the man to their house and then shot. I mean, maybe. Okay. You never know. So on the handout, last line, there is a sacrifice of personal freedom, write down for the greater good. This is for the greater good, but I'm not feeling you guys are following the legalist argument. Yes, I'm giving up certain freedoms, true, but I'm trying to say as a legalist, there's a greater good here. Yes, last comment.
What if spy your neighbor? Couldn't people just abuse that? Because like you're giving them the freedom to spy on you. So what if they don't use it for that reason?
Well, let me ask you a question. Do we abuse our freedoms today?
Yeah.
So what's the difference? Except mine is saving lives. Right now, right now you're free to take a road trip with your girlfriend across the country. And listen, people abuse that. Like you're asking, well, what if people do bad things? We already live in that world. I'm just solving the problem now.
What if your neighbor spies on you?
Now, there's a very different answer in Confucianism. Now, Confucius, who lives about 500 years before Jesus, and it says that he lived in a time of social upheaval. In fact, it was so crazy, it was called the Warring States period. China was fighting China. And Confucius, some 500 years before Jesus, he says, you know what? There's a lot of philosophies and there's a lot of religions, and a lot of religions focus on what happens after you die. A lot of religions ask questions like, well, where will you be reincarnated? Or Jesus later on will talk about heaven. He says, you know what? It's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than a rich man to get to heaven. But Confucius has a problem with all of that because in this room, who here in this room has ever been to heaven? No, put your hand down. Nobody, right? Nobody has been to heaven. And furthermore, who here knows 100% if reincarnation was true, what your last life was? Like, 100%. No one. So Confucius would argue, listen, why are we spending so much talking about a place you've never been? Why are we spending so much time talking about a life you don't know that you'll have? You know what we should probably focus more on is life here on Earth. It would be like if you're telling me about the show you're watching on Netflix and it has 4 seasons. Like, Lacone, you have to start watching it. And I say, okay, I haven't started watching the show yet. I haven't watched season 1, episode 1, but I'm just really concerned about how season 4 finale ends. Why am I worried about season 4 finale if I haven't even started the first season, episode 1? And Confucius would say, why are you worried about heaven when you haven't even figured out how to live life here on Earth? It says on your handout, here, not heaven, the focus on life should be, you'll write down this world. The focus should be this world. Not on some supernatural world. Why are you spending so much time wondering about heaven? Why are you spending so much time, oh, I wonder what my next incarnation is going to be? You don't even know if any of that's right, but you do know you're going to wake up tomorrow and be a student at your high school. You do know you're going to wake up tomorrow and your family's still your family tomorrow. You should think more about that than about what's happening in 60 years when you die, Confucius would say. He said that religion or philosophy should be practical. It should deal with everyday problems, not speculate on things that we have no certainty on. There's a conversation between one of Confucius's students, and one of Confucius's students asked Confucius about serving spirits or serving gods. Hey, there's so many options out there. Do I serve this god? Do I serve that god? And Confucius said, well, if you can't serve men, how can you serve spirits? In other words, if you haven't figured out your loyalty to your fellow man on earth, why are you telling me that you want to know about what god to serve? His student said, I ventured to ask Confucius about death. And Confucius said, if you don't know about life, how can you know about death? Why are you so worried about this other area when you haven't taken care of what's in front of you right now? Confucius argued. And so this is a very different philosophy than legalism. It says on the handout that Confucianism has a focus on, write down, life on earth. This is the most important thing that you need to worry about, is life on earth, not about heaven. You've never been there. Not about some next life. We don't even know if that's true. The most important thing is life on earth. Now, what do I do now that I've decided I'm not going to talk about heaven? I'm not going to talk about reincarnation. What do I need to focus on? Well, there's this word reform on your handout. And I want you to write down that you should change your life to change the world. I want you to write down where it says reform, that you should change your life to change the world. Change your life to change the world. What I mean by this is, if you turn on the TV, are there bad things on TV? Like news? Is there bad stories all around the world? There's sweatshops in Pakistan, right? Nike makes products and they pay workers horrific wages and they don't treat them right. Well, can you practically change labor laws in Pakistan today as a sophomore in high school? No, you can't practically today change that. But what can you change? There's only one thing you can for sure change today, and that's yourself. Because the truth is, all of you have some personality flaws. You have some areas of your life you need growth. And Confucius says, you know what you need to do? What Daniel needs to do is Daniel needs to take a quick look in the mirror and evaluate what are areas for him to grow, and he needs to be better. He needs to be a better son. He needs to be a better classmate. He needs to be a better friend. And that is what Daniel can change. And if Daniel changes that, he's going to actually inspire others. And he's going to make an impact in his family. He's going to make an impact in his school. He's going to make an impact in his community. And it's kind of like if Daniel went to the park and he picked up a small stone, a small rock, and he threw it into a pond. What's that small rock stone going to do to the pond? It's going to make a ripple. And what was a small entry point has an effect much greater than the initial action. Confucius says it this way. He says, if there's any righteousness in Daniel's heart, there'll be beauty in his character. If there's beauty in character, there'll be harmony in his home. If there's harmony in the home, there'll be order in the nation. If there's order in the nation, what will there be? Peace in the world. So actually, Daniel can make world peace happen, but it starts with Daniel being the best version of himself. And if he would just do that, he could actually change his home, his family life could get better, his school could become better, and it ripples out from there. That's Daniel's responsibility to do. Now, that's a big opportunity to change the world. And it turns out that there's some rules to making this happen. In fact, Confucius says to even make this happen, you and I need to recognize and we need to believe in the fact that there is a hierarchy. I want you to write down where it says hierarchy, that there's order to the family and universe. Where it says hierarchy, I want you to write down that there's order to the family and to the universe. And this might bum some of you out, but if this is written by a man who lives 500 years BCE, what is going to be his model for family order and societal order? It's going to be the patriarchy. Dad, yes, but more broadly, Confucius is going to be a proponent of the patriarchy. For Confucius, patriarchy and family is like the solution to everything. It says on the handout, role playing, everyone must play their role. Where it says role playing, everyone must play their role. And things actually go bad when you don't play your role. If China's falling apart, I can guarantee you, Confucius would say, it's because men aren't being men. If China's falling apart, I can guarantee you it's women are not being women. If people start losing their role, the whole country is going to fall apart, Confucius would argue. In fact, the universe works best when you stick to your role. When you stick to your role, that's when the universe works best. If, for example, let's say that Micah was a husband and Micah went to work and Micah came home and all he did was turn on the television, all he did was play video games, all he did was wait for his wife to bring him food, and he ignored his kids, ignored his wife, and went to bed. Is he being a Confucian husband? Do you think that is living up to his role and expectation of leading his family? I would say absolutely not. That's not him being the head of the home. It'd be like if there's a football coach and I hired you and you show up to your office every day, but you never go out to the field, you never make any calls, you never remove people from the field. You're not really coaching, and Micah's not really being a husband. In fact, don't be surprised if Micah's kids start acting bad. Don't be surprised if his wife feels neglected and alone. Don't be surprised if they walk out. And that's what Confucius says, that the universe works best when all of us play our role. And that leads to a word on your handout called propriety. We'll write down for propriety, this is proper behavior. All of us have to figure out the rules of propriety. There's proper behavior that we have as students, proper behavior as daughters, as sons, as husbands and wives. And when we don't have propriety, things fall apart. Confucius would say, if your country's falling apart, I can guarantee you it's because the family is falling apart. Fix the family, you fix China, you fix China, you fix the world. The most important thing for Confucius is, in fact, the family. And there's a word here on the handout called filial piety. And this idea is a big idea, which is why there's a whole paragraph. But most simply, the idea of filial piety is to be good to your parents. Now, that includes a whole lot of stuff because, listen, your parents are super important in Confucianism. Your job to being a good daughter and being a good son, it's huge. We have a paragraph. Let's talk about what filial piety means. It means to take care of your parents. It means to engage in good conduct, not just towards your parents, but also outside the home so as to bring, you'll write down, a good name to your parents. Let's imagine if you want to grow up to become a nurse and you go to nursing school, you get hired at Texas Children's and you become the head nurse. And not only the head nurse, but like whenever there's new nurses training, they want to be assigned to work with you. How are your parents going to feel about your job as the head nurse at Texas Children's?
Proud.
They're going to be proud. But what about me? What if my grandfather leaves Mexico in the 1930s, and he did, and my grandfather comes to the United States from Chihuahua, and he has children here, and he does, and then I am my grandfather's grandson, and then I don't graduate from high school, I get girls pregnant, I don't keep a job, I live at home and play video games all day and eat Hot Pockets living with my parents. Have I brought pride to my grandpa saying, that's why I left Mexico? No. We have a responsibility, all of us in Confucianism, to bring a good name. It's not just about you. It's about your entire family line, to your parents and your ancestors. It says on the handout, you need to perform duties of your job well, so to obtain the material means to, write down, support your parents. One day, your parents are not going to be able to work anymore. Your parents aren't going to be able to go to their jobs. And guess what? There's no Social Security. There's no Medicare. You know what the plan for taking care of your parents is 500 BCE? You are. And if you're not working hard today, how are you going to provide for two more people who can't work at all, your mom and dad, when they live with you? You need to as well carry out sacrifices to the ancestors, not be rebellious. You need to show love. In the blank, you're going to write down respect. You need to have respect for your mom and dad. You need to support them. You need to display courtesy. And this is super important. You need to ensure, please write down, male heirs. You need to make sure that you're having baby boys. Now, that's important because even though baby girls are great, once your baby girl gets married, is she staying living with you as a married woman, living with you, the mom and dad? She's leaving. In fact, if she's taking care of anyone, you know whose family she's going to take care of? Her husband's mom and dad. You need to produce male heirs, and you need to keep trying until you have some baby boys. You need to uphold, it says on the handout, fraternity among brothers. That means like friendship among your brothers. You need to be able to wisely advise your parents, including dissuading them from moral unrighteousness. You need to display, it says on the handout, sorrow when your mom gets sick or when your mom dies. You need to carry out sacrifices after their death. Listen, your job as a kid is huge in Confucianism. And when you don't do your job, the family falls apart. And when the family falls apart, society falls apart. Everyone has a role to play.